smart to me really is about either control or about making decisions more effectively, and usually some combination of the two of those through digital technology.
Today is all about the adjective smart. The word has been adopted across the energy sector from transmission to consumer use.
So when Ofgem thinks about smart grids or smart in general, we're often thinking about sensors to capture information about what's happening within an energy system. We're thinking about communications networks to then transfer that information. And then we're thinking about control mechanisms, so some way of taking that information that's being generated and pulling it back into somewhere that makes a decision.
To discuss what smart means for the UK's energy system right now and in the future, and how it feeds into the role of the consumer, we have enlisted two very smart minds. Liam Bennett, head of Ofgem's Energy Systems Digitalisation team, and former energy retail CEO Monica Collins.
The journey to a smarter energy future is no one-size-fits-all answer. It is about navigating wildly different circumstances, not just tech skills or upfront costs. But if we imagine that controlling our entire home, whether it's lights, appliances, entertainment, right from your phone, is possible, that's not science fiction. That's smart living right here, right now. Smart homes aren't just a win for customers, they're a win for energy suppliers and everyone managing their energy better.
I'm Claire Nazir, and this is Inside Energy, a podcast by Ofgem, exploring how the energy we use today has evolved and how it will change in the future. The provision of power in the UK is evolving. Earlier in the series, we heard Dr. Jonathan Ayling describe the UK's first national grid as the Lucky Grid. Built in the 1930s, ahead of schedule, at a time of recession when manual and skilled labour was widely available. Now that made way in the 1950s for the supergrid, marking a new era in the way electricity powered the country. 75 years later, stepped forward the smart grid. Here's Ofgem's Liam Bennett.
So a traditional energy grid was really thought of as a combination of infrastructure sites and wires, right? Or well, pipelines if you're thinking about gas. And you understood kind of broadly how many of those assets you were investing in and how they were going to deteriorate over time at a large scale. What a smart grid is saying we actually want to monitor those assets. We want data about how they're operating in the moment so that we can change how we operate the grids to respond to that. So it's partly a response to consumer behavior, but it's partly a response as well to the actual assets themselves on the system. So it's about sensing what's happening, communicating that information back, and then making a better decision as a DNO or as a transmission operator to reduce the costs of operating your network.
Rather than discrete steps of improvement or troubleshooting, it's a continual flow back and forth where you're refining all the while.
Absolutely. And it's sometimes it's going to be a human on the other end of that making a decision based on that information, but sometimes it's going to be an algorithm as well saying, as I'm getting that continuous flow of information, I make some small changes.
The uptake of AI tools has been integral to the UK's smart grid rollout. The use of a digital twin is one example. This is a virtual, real-time counterpart of a physical energy asset or system, such as a power grid, substation, or renewable energy farm, that continuously mirrors its operations using live data, sensors, and advanced analytics.
If you can feed your information that's actually what's happening on your network back into the digital twin, you can start to make decisions off the edge of that. I think the main area we're seeing AI deployed at the moment is actually around the health of those assets, of those substations on the system. So before, what you would have is we install these assets at a certain point. They have certain characteristics, like how big are they, how much power flows through them. And based on that, you made an estimation of when the asset would need to be replaced. Right? And you do that at kind of a quite top-down level. Now with AI, feeding in that data from that substation, how it operates, you can say exactly where and when it needs to be replaced. And you can feed that through into your business plan and you can save money because you're actually not investing in replacing those assets before it was needed. Right? So you can start using AI there to say, and taking images as well of transmission lines to say, is there any damage here? What's actually happening? And then feeding that back through into an algorithm, into AI, and say, this needs to be replaced soon, or actually this is really healthy. There's still, I think, a barrier we want to put in place for now in terms of more operation of the system in real time. With AI, it is still, I think, proving itself and its reliability and putting it into the crucial operation of, something that's critical to national infrastructure and national security is not the right time, I think, to be releasing it onto the operation of the system, but certainly about protecting it and maintaining it.
With many new possible pathways comes a fresh set of challenges.
So part of it is being able to actually roll out all of those technologies you need to become smart. So sensors aren't cheap when you're deploying them across the whole of the GB energy system. And this is really in-demand technology. It's not just used in the energy sector, it's used in all of the utility sectors, but also relies on core hardware that is in demand in the world, right? So it's hard to get hold of sometimes. So we are making sure that funding is available for your distribution network operator or your transmission operator to be able to go and get those technologies and deploy them, but crucially making sure they don't overspend on them, right? Or don't deploy too much technology that ends up costing the consumer more money. Once you have all that information, you're going to find problems and you're going to need solutions to that problem. So Ofgem's policy work is often now quite reactive to some of those new problems that are coming up as we have more monitoring of the system and as we have more flexibility markets. So you need a market and you need a regulator who responds to those problems as you newly identify them. And I think the final challenge for companies in the sector is really around skills. There's a serious upskilling needed in digital across the UK. Energy is no exception to that.
Another challenge where smart approaches are being adopted is a flexible energy system.
Flexibility is really just changing how you consume power or gas. But when we talk about flexibility, we're mostly talking about the electricity grid. And it's really sometimes turning up how much you use, sometimes turning down how much you use. And it's a really old thing. We've had flexibility on the energy system for a really long time. We just used to get it through coal power stations, and we still get a lot of it through gas power stations that can, in, a matter of minutes, change how much they're producing up and down, right? To respond to the state of the grid, as it were. Intermittency is a characteristic, I suppose, of wind and solar and other renewables, in that, solar, you only have sun during the day. Wind is very dependent on weather conditions. If there's too much wind, you have to turn off turbines. There's not enough wind, you're not actually generating any power. It's obviously, as we increase the number of renewables, we increase the amount of intermittency. It's just a fundamental factor. What that means is that to balance the grid, you need sources of flexibility. So when the sun stops shining, you need something to step up in its place, right? And we can't have that be coal plants, and we can't have that be gas plants if we're going to meet our net zero targets. So you have to find some other source. And I think where the industry is really focusing now is, if consumers are starting to have more devices in their homes, like EV chargers, like heat pumps, that can be flexible, that you can change how it's used, why can't consumers take part in those flexibility markets and generate revenue themselves from that? So it's a real growth area. There's big commitments from the government and from the National Energy System operator to bring more of that in to try and meet the challenges posed by intermittency.
Consumer participation is often about making informed decisions about our energy usage.
There is what's called load shaping. So whenever there's an idea that when you are at home, often most people are using power between about 5 and 8 p.m., right? You're maybe using electricity to cook your dinner, you've got lots of lights on, you're watching the TV, whatever. And there is a part of flexibility, which is just shifting consumption away from there. So it's just saying, don't charge your EV at that point. Heat pumps a little bit more difficult to move away from that kind of time. But then there's also specific events. So say it's 2 p.m. and suddenly a gas plant or something trips on the electricity system, and you need something to step into the gap, right? To be able to actually still meet the power of the system. You can tell an EV charger to start charging your vehicle at that point, and it can participate in that. So there's discrete events, and then there's these kind of general patterns of consumption that you can change as well. So it's all really an opportunity for people to take part in that. Now you could turn your lights off, you could cook at a different time. All very difficult things to shift, but EV chargers and heat pumps really give you a new opportunity in batteries, solar, all those kinds of things.
The concept of flexibility is not a far cry from the late 20th century initiatives like Economy 7 or the more traditional storage heater. It's an amazing invention. We haven't gone that far from that when it comes to that sort of type of storage. You know, it's a clever way of being efficient and adding flexibility into the system.
It's exactly that load shaping I was talking about. It's still a really important part of flexibility. I think it's really important we don't see flexibility as some fancy new technology problem, but actually it's something that's always existed. We're just changing where we get it because now technology can help us do that.
So a smart customer for me is someone who actively engages in smart energy tech and services that help them with optimising their energy consumption, which may end up with them saving money or enabling them to be more sustainable, depending on what their motivations are.
Monica Collings is an award-winning former energy retail CEO who serves on multiple non-executive and advisory boards and champions gender representation in the workplace.
The new first step is on this energy transition is smart meters, because they are now the gateway that unlocks so much potential for how we use energy in the home. And it's really important for us to consider, once those smart meters are in and working effectively, actually we can see the benefit because customers become savvier.
And making these choices delivers many positives.
More customers don't want to interact with their energy supplier. So one of the benefits of enabling smart within the home means that actually they can use real-time insights into energy to lead more efficient consumption. But from a supplier perspective, they can more proactively manage accounts. So I think it's about convenience, it's about efficiency, security, but also importantly, there's an affordability element to it as well.
Affordability has become a stark issue for many consumers, over the last few years in particular.
The energy crisis has seen more than 4 billion of debt accrued by customers, and they were unable to afford to pay their energy bills during the peak despite government support packages. And some of those customers will continue to fall into increasing levels of debt. Some of them will also be quite vulnerable and so need more support than others when it comes to a fair and just energy transition. So when we talk about net zero, we get very excited about the potential for homes to participate in things like grid flexibility and offset investment in infrastructure. It's quite a long way from the reality for quite a few customers who actually don't even know what a kilowatt hour is and just want a warm home that they can afford.
In a survey by E.ON published in February 2025, 63% of those polled said they were willing to embrace smart tech. However, the biggest challenge was upfront costs, with 67% seeing this as the main barrier and only 27% concerned about reliability.
So I think affordable ways of offsetting some of that upfront cost of smart technology into the homes is what we need to do in order to bring everyone on the journey and not leave anyone behind.
The UK government set a target for energy suppliers to install smart meters in all homes and small businesses by 2020. The aim was to improve energy efficiency, reduce bills, and support the transition to a smarter grid. A mass rollout began in 2013, but the deadline was extended. By the end of 2024, approximately 38 million smart and advanced meters were installed in homes and small businesses across Great Britain. 34 million of those were operating in smart mode. That's 60% of all meters.
So we are still seeing an increase in installations, but that was very much skewed towards the south and the east of England. So I think the targets that were set for smart meters to be installed in 80% of British homes and 73% of small businesses by the end of 2025. And it all points to those targets being missed because of all of the challenges that we understand around installation capacity, capability, and also homes, and the challenges of getting smart meters into homes and getting them working. I'd like to think that what smart meters do is really significant because there is a big shift. The relationship with energy suppliers is changing as a result of the world becoming smarter and the more complex data that's available. If we look at, for example, those who are on half-hourly tariffs, the requirement's 48 meter reads every single day. We're connecting all of these new low-carbon technologies, EVs, heat pumps, domestic batteries, telling them when to operate. We've got signals going back and forth. The technology is fantastic, and AI is a tool that can help us with that. But ultimately, we are interacting with customers, and customer behaviour is unpredictable, and our circumstances change, and we have to recognise that.
Unpredictable as it is, there is recognition that the relationship between energy providers and customers needs to keep evolving.
What we now have is a two-way flow. We have customers who are selling back to the grid, who are moving from consumers to become prosumers, and their relationship changes with energy because they're actually benefiting from it and making money potentially from those interactions. So when we do that and we change the nature of that relationship, we have to become more customer centric in the way in which we approach it. And what customers don't want is for it to be difficult. So Citizens Advice did some interesting analysis. Their findings showed that 3 in 5 customers failed to know where to go for energy efficiency advice. So we've got to be clearer and better in providing that advice and support for customers. And we need choice and options. Prepayment meters get a really bad rep in the media, but actually for many customers, they offer the perfect option to manage those payments in financially stressed situations. So what we need to do is not discriminate against particular groups of customers, but really understand what their needs are and then develop products and services that meet those needs and help them to participate in this energy transition.
This new dynamic two-way, where consumers have become prosumers, allows for a greater flow of information. This is smart data.
Let me tell you what smart data is. It refers to the frameworks of processes where customer data is shared securely on a customer's request. And why is that important? Well, we can access innovation and personalised products and services as customers in exchange for giving our data. But in order for that framework to work, there has to be a great deal of trust. And so we need that data to evolve and the way in which suppliers to use it in a framework that is very trusted. If we look at banking and the open data solutions that the banking sector developed, originally they were distrusted, and they have evolved into perhaps one of the most trusted sectors in the world. And for energy, we've gone from a situation during the crisis where a lot of media sensationalizing of headlines has led to customers distrusting them and perhaps thinking that they're profiteering out of their sort of sad situations. You might have heard of Smart Data Research UK. They're currently working with the Energy Systems Catapult to create something called Smart Energy Data Service, so SENSE, which is going to use smart data generated from everyday digital interactions like smartphones and smart home appliances, devices, and use that to address challenges in the net zero transition. DESNES is also doing its own work on smart data. So I think there's a whole spectrum of solutions that are going to come together. And ultimately, I think where we'll shake out is that there'll be some data services that help us to rebuild the trust that has been lost within the energy sector with consumers.
Looking ahead, how does Ofgem support the consumer as they get smarter? Liam Bennett.
Yeah, so obviously one of our key roles at Ofgem is protecting consumers and making sure that as this energy system becomes more complex, that they can understand it as much as they want to and need to, but also can interact with maybe new services that become available to them as they get EV chargers, heat pumps, different ways to interact with the energy system. There's a real transition coming over the next 5 to 10 years of consumers getting more tailored information that's specific to them on what kind of services they want to take up.
And it's about keeping up with the accelerating pace of technology and its adoption.
If you look at the tech sector, 15 years ago, we were still using iPods and shuffles and those kind of things. And now look at where we're at with app stores and with all of those self-curated apps and information we have at our fingertips. I think that is starting to come into energy, and we're starting to see a real increase in interest from some of those technology sectors, and we're starting to see people wanting to come in and manage that complexity. So I think it's moving very quickly. It's sometimes difficult to keep up with, I think, as someone participating in the sector. But I think it unlocks so much value for people at the end of the day, and so that's why we're encouraging it. Just having a smart meter alone is you contributing to the energy system, right? If your supplier can understand how you're consuming energy, that can then feed through into, how the network is running. And just that understanding of that information, not even having to interact with you, allows people to operate more effectively. It then is kind of a gateway to those new services we've talked about already, whether it be flexibility, whether it be optimizing how warm your home is in different rooms. There's lots of different ways you can start to then interact with the energy system. We already talked about the demand flexibility service.
However, it's important to note that Ofgem isn't expecting everyone to get on board when a new technology comes onto the market. Far from it.
We model some of our work on what's happening in the banking space. And what we've seen there is really you only need somewhere around 10% of consumers to actually participate in a scheme to change a market, right? And if you start to bring in some of those new opportunities and the market starts to change, then other consumers start to get interested, and you get this sort of slow increase of people on that new technology journey. So it's definitely not we're moving to a smart future and everyone has to participate in the most smart way possible. Like a small amount sometimes can make a big change to the marketplace.
In order to develop smart energy systems, we need smart people with smart skills. The UK energy sector has always adapted to meet society's needs and the resources at its disposal. As energy demand grows and decarbonisation adds complexity to expanding capacity, the need for a skilled workforce has never been greater. According to National Grid projections, by 2050, the UK will require 400,000 roles to build the net zero energy workforce, 260,000 of which will be entirely new positions. That's the equivalent of around 35% of the current energy workforce. Meeting this demand will require talent across AI, digitalisation and customer-centric roles as flexibility becomes a cornerstone of the UK's Clean Power Plan 2030. Monica Collings again.
So DESNOS highlights that by 2050, the domestic market for smart systems and flexibility could contribute up to 1.3 billion to the economy. So the potential for the smart energy transition to drive significant demand for green skills is huge. I think that the shift to more renewable energy solutions, modernising grids, adopting smart technologies, all of those things are incredibly interesting areas of career development, and the workforce needs to develop skills and expertise in areas like energy efficiency, sustainable practices, digital innovations, plus all of the installation capacity that's going to be needed in order to actually deliver the change in homes. And that transition, I think, will create huge opportunities for jobs, particularly in those low carbon sectors, but also really highlights the need for targeted education, training, collaboration between government, business, educational institutions, lots of opportunities to actually build out skills bases in areas that bring in fresh talent and make sure that all of those organisations are employing people who are very talented, but also really representative of the customers and communities that are consuming energy.
And that wide range of skills are needed at Ofgem too.
So there are myriad opportunities, I think, if you're a data scientist who's interested in the energy sector, or someone working in the energy sector who's interested in learning more about the digital world. There are real opportunities within regulators and policymakers. We're having to be more digital in how we understand how companies are behaving and how our policies should change. You have loads of markets that are operating, and you have to understand in real time how people on your network are behaving, and then how you can optimize some of your different assets to compete in those markets. You're thinking about, in this area that I'm responsible for, How many people are going to take up EVs and heat pumps over the next couple of years? And then how do I build my infrastructure to meet that? And then you're thinking, well, is there an opportunity for me as a generator? So there's loads of insights, I think, that can be developed about the energy system, and there's lots of places around that you can generate those insights at.
My thanks to Liam Bennett from Ofgem and industry expert Monica Collings for their insight on this episode. If you enjoyed it, share it with someone who also might like it. I'm Claire Nazir. Inside Energy is a Bengo Media production for Ofgem.